Hello, everybody. So, I'm very happy to present some elements on the MSFR today in the frame of this summer school, and I'm very happy of the lectures given by Jan Len and by Sandra because it's wonderful for what I will tell you. And of course, you will need also some more lectures to understand everything that will come after. So I will mention them. So I'm just modify slightly the title by design and integral safety analysis of the MSFR because some design aspects are very important, as mentioned by Sandra, to understand the safety issues and the safety specificities of such a reactor. I just mentioned some people that are working with us today or in the past and that produced a lot of results and many interesting reflections around the MSFR. Okay, I just would like to come back to some basic elements on liquid circulating fuel reactor because I think it's very important to understand clearly what I will tell in the following about safety on such reactors. So I remind you of the advantages of having a liquid fuel. We have an homogeneity of the fuel, no loading plan. The heat, when the fuel is used as the coolant, is produced directly in the heat transfer fluid, and this impacts, among other things, the transfer between the transfer time and which is very fast and which allow very fast thermal feedback. We have the possibility to reconfigure passively and very quickly the fuel. The geometry of the fuel between the configuration optimized to produce electricity and the configuration optimized to store the fuel, even for long term. And we can drain gravitationally the fuel very simply and very quickly. Then it's possible to reprocess, to clean the fuel without stopping the reactor, which allows a better management of the fission products and which allows having no reactivity reserve when we start the reactor. It's very important regarding safety. So when we consider the advantages of a liquid fuel, the next question is which liquid fuel? Because we jump on molten salt reactor at the beginning of the school, but why molten salt reactor? In fact, we have a lot of constraints for the liquid fuel. We have to have a melting temperature not too high, a high boiling temperature, a low vapor pressure. It has to be transparent to neutrons because it's a fuel. We have to have good thermal and hydraulic properties because it's a coolant. It has to be stable under radiation to allow a good solubility of fissile and fertile matter, to allow a solution to clean, to control the fuel salt composition. And finally, we would like to avoid the production of radioisotope hardly manageable. When you combine all these constraints, you have only two solutions, a fluoride or chloride salts. It's why these reactors are called molten salt reactor. And then one last question, fluoride or chloride? Because it has been raised yesterday. So just a small consideration on how we choose for the MSFR, let's say. We have combined both neutronic and chemical issues consideration to choose the fluoride salts. So first, if we consider the neutronic issues, the neutronic arguments, and first the breeding ratio of such a reactor. So I display, I display here the neutron spectrum in a molten salt reactor using in green a fluoride salt and in purple a sodium chloride salt. And you can see that the fluoride version is less fast than the chloride one. A chloride salt allows a spectrum harder than a fluoride one. But when you combine this to the neutron available for breeding and you combine this with the thorium fuel cycle that we use in the MSFR, then finally you obtain a breeding ratio that is better for a fluoride salt compared to a chloride salt, clearly. So the breeding ratio is better. And then another thing to mention, and not linked to the thorium fuel cycle, is that the neutron spectrum is less fast with the fluoride salts, and you reduce the irradiation damages to the structural materials by a factor 5 to 7, which is very interesting. So when using a fluoride salt, you have less irradiation damages. And this is quite important for us. Then we consider what I call chemical issues, but maybe it's better to call production of radioisotope for each salt. And you can see that the main, so I list everything as for sulfur or oxygen or tellurium that is produced for both salts. But for the two first line, when you use a chloride salt, you produce chlorine 36 that is very radioactive and very difficult to manage because it's impossible to confine it. When you use a lithium fluoride salt, you have a production of tritium, but it's maybe easier, for example, with water, to manage tritium compared to chlorine 36, and the radioactivity is higher for chlorine 36. So clearly, regarding this issue, it's clear that regarding chemical consideration, to avoid production of chlorine 36 and to reduce regarding neutronics irradiation damages, we have chosen the fluoride salts, and the choice of the thorium fuel cycle rely, as explained by Jan Len, on a smaller production of monoactinides, and here a higher breeding ratio combined with the fluoride salt. So, very, very briefly, I just would like to remind you of the historical studies at Oak Ridge, and I will focus on the molten salt breeder reactor never built that was designed to be an industrial molten salt reactor, including graphite in a thermal neutron spectrum. And these studies has been performed in the 70s, not with the computer tool we have today. So the idea at CNRS was to recompute to restudy the molten salt breeder reactor, and by using some tools available now on the computer we have now. It means a stochastic neutronic code coupled to an in-house code to calculate the material evolution developed at Grenoble, and the coupling has been used to reevaluate the molten salt breeder reactor, and we have shown that it has a null to positive thermal feedback coefficient. The fuel salt thermal coefficient are negative, but the graphite one are positive, and on the long term you have a positive null to positive thermal feedback in the reactor. You have a positive void coefficient. The processing, due to the thermal spectrum, there are many capture by the fission product and the elements in the reactor. So the processing was very, very heavy, and I think Sylvie will detail more precisely this point in her lecture. And there was problem related to the graphite moderator, the lifetime of it, how to process and to store it, and of course the fire risk in the reactor. So finally, we had at this time two ways: either to optimize this, as mentioned by Sandra, to have a better MSBR, or to choose another more innovative way. It means we forget all this and we restart from the liquid fuel. Here, the liquid circulating fuel and its advantages, and now we do new studies, and not an optimization of the MSBR, new studies by combining these advantages of a liquid fuel with the neutronic optimization of MSR. Because in the time between the MSBR, Generation 4 International Forum has selected six concepts, but has defined criteria to optimize this concept. And then we choose to combine the advantages of a liquid fuel reactor with the Gen 4 criteria proposed by Gen 4, and more precisely at the beginning regarding neutronic. It means regarding for safety, having all negative feedback coefficient, regarding sustainability to reduce irradiation damages in the core, regarding deployment to have a group boiling ratio combined with a reduced initial fissile inventory. And so these studies has been the object of the PhD thesis of Ludovic Mathieu, and I will just present you at CNRS, and I will just present you some major results of the study done by Ludovic. So he has studied many configuration of MSR with graphite, and as you can see, with the same fuel cell volume in all the configuration, but by varying the amount of graphite in the core. You have here a lot of graphite in the core, and this corresponds to the blue neutron spectrum, a very thermal spectrum. Then less graphite in the core corresponding to the green spectrum, epithermal spectrum. And then you increase the salt channel up to having no more graphite here in the core. And when you have no more graphite in the core, there is no more solid moderator in the core, and then you obtain the fast neutron spectrum in purple on this view. And then for these three kinds of configuration, thermal, epithermal, fast, he has studied the neutronic characteristic of the core, and it means first the feedback coefficient. So you have here the total feedback coefficient of the reactor as a function of the channel radius. It means from thermal to fast version, and the idea is to have all feedback coefficient negative. It means that this area is not acceptable. So we have to choose either the very thermal configurations or the epithermal to fast configuration for this criterion. Then, regarding the breeding ratio of the reactor, we have here displayed the breeding ratio in green. And in fact, we have two parameters here, two phenomena. First, we are using the thorium fuel cycle, and there we have to consider the neutron balance. And I remind you of the neutron available for breeding here in red for the plutonium fuel cycle and in blue for the thorium fuel cycle. And you can see that we can reach breeding for thermal neutrons or for fast neutrons, not in the epithermal area. And it's the dotted line, the black dashed line here. It corresponds to the breeding ratio just by considering the neutron balance in the reactor. So you can see that it's okay, except for the epithermal area. But then we have to consider that for the part on the left of the figure, you have a lot of graphite in the core, a lot of graphite moderator in the core. And you have to consider the neutron captors in the moderator that are very important for the thermal spectrum. And these correspond to, it's why we don't have this breeding ratio, but this one. The difference is due to the neutron captors in the core. And then we have to suppress this part because we cannot reach breeding in this part due to the important neutron capture. And finally, we have to consider the epithermal to fast configuration. Then finally, the graphite lifetime is very important to take into account, and I display here the neutron flux in the reactor as here, and on the right the graphite lifetime. Sorry, here, and you can see that. When you are in the left part of the diagram, the neutron flux is low, logically, and the graphite lifetime is high, but the amount of graphite is very important in the core. And even if you have to change the graphite not that much, you have large amount of graphite each time to manage. When you increase the neutron energy, let's say, you increase the neutron flux, you reduce the neutron lifetime, you also reduce the amount of graphite in the core, but the graphite lifetime is very short. And finally, one specific point here, because here you have no more graphite in the core. So you have no more graphite to manage and no more graphite problem, let's say. So finally, if I summarize briefly, you have the thermal version, epithermal version, fast version of the MSR. And when we summarize the characteristic of each, in green you have the advantages, in let's say orange it's okay, in red it's bad. We have to avoid it. And if we consider the thermal spectrum configuration, you have a positive feedback coefficient, even if it maybe is a breeder with a very heavy processing. We have a quite long graphite lifetime, but a lot of graphite to manage, and a low initial fissile inventory, which is a good point of this configuration. Then, regarding the epithermal spectrum configuration, you have a quite negative to null feedback coefficient, so this one is not acceptable because of the feedback coefficient. This one, a quite negative to null feedback coefficient, it can be isobreeder, but we have a very short graphite lifetime, and it's a key point. We have a quite low initial fissile inventory. And then the only configuration without something in red is the fast spectrum configuration. I mean the configuration without graphite in the core. We have very negative feedback coefficient, a very good breeding ratio, no problem with graphite, there is no more graphite, and some larger initial fissile inventory. So we choose this one, and I call this MSFR, but it's not the MSFR because we don't like this orange part. So we, the next step was to optimize the initial fissile inventory to improve it. And this has been done by optimizing the specific power of the reactor. For this, we have the choice to play between the total power of the reactor or the fuel cell volume and the core geometry. We choose to fix the produced produced power to 3 thermal gigawatt to be equivalent to EPR or such equivalent reactor, large reactor. And the idea is, if we find optimized solution for all the reactor with such a high power, we will find solution for lower power. And if we have really a problem that we cannot solve, we can reduce this power. We did find solution up to now. So we tried still to fix this point, and then we play on the fuel cell volume. And I have to mention that we have a liquid fuel and no solid matter inside the core in the high in the part of with a high neutron flux. So we have the possibility to reach specific power much higher than in a solid fuel reactor. We have not the same constraints. More precisely, we have 3 limiting factors. First, when if we fix the power, if we reduce the fuel cell volume, we are limited by the capacities to extract heat because the fuel is the coolant. So we have limitation in terms of heat extraction, in terms of associated pressure drops. Of course, the larger the fuel salt volume is, the easier it is. Regarding the neutronic and radiation damages to the structural materials, I did not mention before, but you will have more information on that. But I think Victor explained it yesterday. We used nickel-based alloy for as structural materials right now, and the irradiation damages will modify their physical-chemical properties with 3 effects: displacement per atom, the production of helium, and the transmutation of tungsten contained in the alloy in osmium. So also we would like to have low specific power to have the small irradiation damages. And finally, the neutronic characteristic of the reactor. In terms of burning efficiency, we found if we would like to burn transuranic elements, here we need higher specific power. And if we look at the deployment capacities, which is a balance between the breeding ratio and the initial fissile inventory, we find an optimal for the medium volume, let's say 15 to 20 cubic meter, with a specific power between 300 and 400 watt per cubic centimeter. And this solution is okay regarding heat exchanges or irradiation damages. So we choose a configuration in this area, and what we call today the reference MSFR configuration as a total fuel cell volume of 18 cubic meter, half in the core, half as fuel, half out of the core as coolant, used as coolant, and it corresponds to an initial fissile inventory of 3.5 tons per electric gigawatt. When you compare to other Gen 4 concept, it's very good. It's very low. And moreover, I have to remind you that there is only one fissile load per reactor, not one in the core and one in the reprocessing. The reprocessing is done during reactor operation, so we only need 3.5 tons of fissile matter per reactor to operate it. And finally, this is very good. And this is the MSFR, reference MSFR configuration. So to summarize, when you combine the advantage of a liquid fuel with neutronic optimization using the Gen 4 criteria, we defined an innovative MSR concept called by the GIF policy group molten salt fast reactor with all feedback thermal coefficient negative, no solid matter in the high flux area, a good breeding of the fissile matter, and actinide burning improved thanks to the fast neutron spectrum. I put here a summary of the GIF annual report of 2008, mentioning that the molten salt neutron reactor is a long-term alternative to solid fuel fast neutron reactor, offering very negative feedback coefficient and a simplified fuel cycle. And we have been asked to evaluate its potential in terms of specific technological challenges and safety approach, which are the two main points, very different between liquid fuel reactor and solid fuel reactor. So the next step was the EVOL project, collaborative project. It was a collaborative project between Euratom and Rosatom, combined to the Mars minor actinides recycling in molten salt project of Rosatom, with 11 European partners, with 2 observers, Politecnico di Milano and Paul Scherrer Institute, which are now partners of the next project, with 3 work packages. And some outputs of the project were, for example, an optimized toroidal shape of the core. At the beginning, the idea we have of the MSFR was this one, and finally, to optimize the heating of the fuel to the homogeneity of the heating of the fuel in the reactor, a toroidal shape has been designed, allowing an homogeneous heating of the fuel in the core due to nuclear reaction. And I will also present some element on the neutronic benchmark already presented by Sandra for the fraction of delayed neutrons. And we have proposed an initial fuel cell composition and some development of safety. I will come back in more detail after on. So just a small word, because when you speak of initial fuel cell composition, neutronic benchmark, etc. Just to remind you that in the MSFR, the cleaning of the fuel salt, the cleaning of the control of the fuel salt is done during the reactor operation, and we have to take into account the impact of this element to the reactor operation. It's very important, even more when people know only the MSBR, where the 2 elements were very coupled, and the reprocessing for the MSBR had an impact on the reactor operation and the safety of the reactor. So what about the MSFR? I will not detail the reprocessing unit, of course, it's not, Sylvie will do it later on. Just to mention you that for 4th generation reactor, we would like, it's mandatory to have breeder reactor, and if we want to have breeder reactor, we have to process the fuel. It's mandatory. So the fuel salt processing is mandatory to recover the fissile matter produced, and also to clean the salt. So the fission product extraction, traditionally the motivations are to control the physico-chemical properties of the salt, control deposit, the problem of erosion and corrosion phenomena, and to keep good neutronic properties of the fuel salt. And I just display here briefly a very basic view of the MSFR, and 2 processing are done. What we call physical separation, it's an injection of bubble in the fuel salt, maybe in the core, maybe out of the core, it's not decided, to extract the non-soluble fission products. Maybe it's not mandatory, because the non-soluble fission product will extract themselves in the plate of the heat exchangers, for example, for the metallic fission products. And the bubbles, the gases will be extracted automatically. So maybe this element is not mandatory. We have to work on this. And a chemical separation, we take a batch of 10 liters of fuel per day. It's a very small amount, and it's sent to a processing unit to extract the lanthanides. So the idea was to have an idea of this processing and the reactor operation, and for this we need to take into account the processing in the material evolution when doing evolutive calculation. We choose to have an evolving Monte Carlo calculations based on the MCNP code. So I briefly summarize here how it's works, but we have a program where we define the geometry of the core, the problem's parameters. Let's say I would like to reprocess 10 liters per day. I would like to have a bubbling period, an extraction by the bubbling of 30 seconds, let's say. We perform MCNP calculations, then we have by nuclear reaction a modification of the materials taken into account in the program to do a new Monte Carlo calculation. We have to take into account chemical data, nuclear data, and this is done by solving the Bateman equation for one nucleus, but with some specific term due to the fact that we add element and we extract element during reactor operation. So you have the traditional Bateman equation with the production. The production of elements of this nucleus by nuclear reaction. I will put everything. So the production by nuclear reaction, the production by radioactive decay from another nuclei, and the disappearance by radioactive decay or by nuclear reaction. And in blue, two specific terms here are added to take into account the processing. And the processing is extraction and the addition of element is considered, let's say, chemical decay. It's really equivalent to a chemical decay. And then the elements, the nuclei are located in each place of the system, in the core, in the chemical unit, and elsewhere in the system, taking into account a neutron flux when there are, or only decay, radioactive decay, when we have only radioactive decay or extraction. Then we can calculate the evolution of matter in all the parts of the system for all the isotopes. And this allow calculation of gamma or neutron flux elsewhere in the system. And this is very important to follow the evolution of the fuel and to study the processing and the safety of the reactor. It's the basis of the design and safety and radioprotection assessment of the whole system. And just to apply this to the processing, to the impact of processing on the neutronic operation of the reactor, you have here on the left the breeding ratio of the reactor as a function of the time to reprocess the whole core. And you can see that we have many years to reprocess the core without having any impact, it's a chemical processing, on the reactor operation from a neutronic point of view. I summarize here the absorption, neutron absorption on the heavy nuclei, very important, and on the three main parts of fission products, which is negligible. And you see exactly the same thing on the bubbling processing. The breeding ratio as a function of the bubbling period. There is no impact of the processing on the neutronic properties of the reactor. Because of the fast neutron spectrum, we have a very low capture cross-sections on the fission products, and then a very low impact of the chemistry on the neutronics. Then it's very important because we can do parallel studies of chemical and neutronic issues, and it's very important because the chemistry did not impact directly the safety of the system. But of course, on the long term, yes, the safety, the cleanup of the fuel is mandatory, the control and cleanup of the fuel, to guarantee that the physico-chemical properties of the salt are stable. To avoid corrosion, erosion, etc. But it's another problem. It's not directly neutronic, and this is very important and very useful. I continue? I can stop or I can continue. I continue. So to come back to the neutronic, now that we have the tool available to calculate the evolution of matter in the reactor, we can apply it on the evolution of the fuel salt in the core. And the first thing is that this evolving Monte Carlo tool has been validated on the MSBR during the PhD thesis of Alexis Nutin. that it was not directly validated on a fast concept. It was validated on a thermal concept, but not on a fast concept. And this was the idea of the neutronic benchmark that we did with a lot of partners in the room in the frame of the EVOL project. So we do some calculations, so static and evolutive calculation, neutronic calculation of the reactor. And I present here two results. First, the feedback coefficient. First, the feedback coefficient as a function of the operation time for a lot of partners. And we can see that we have all negative, largely negative feedback coefficient, whatever we use as simulation tool or as nuclear database, and this is very important. All the safety, all the feedback parameters are negative, are very good, whatever we use to calculate them, and we see a good agreement between the partners. And then, so it was part also of the PhD thesis of Maria Brovchenko, and which drives a neutronic benchmark. And then I displayed two things. On the bottom here, an evolution of the uranium inventory in the reactor for the same calculation tool for different nuclear databases. And you can see a large for NDF B7, B6, and JEF 3.1. You can see a large impact of the result of the breeding, let's say, of the reactor as a function of the nuclear data. And this is very important. And we need more refined nuclear data. And then here we use the same database but with different tools between Kurchakov Institute, LPSC, and Politecnico di Milano. And we see a very good and very, very good agreement on the calculation of various isotopes, curium, americium, protactinium, etc. And so a very good agreement on the validation of the simulation tools and only an impact of the nuclear data. This was very important, and we are very confident with our tools now. And this is very positive. Okay, I continue. I can finish the deployment capacities and then I will start safety after the break. So the one last point we have to study in the frame of EVOL was how to start the MSFR fleet, because there is no uranium-233 on Earth, as there is no plutonium-9 on Earth. There is only uranium-235 as fissile matter. So how can we use this uranium-235 to cleverly start nuclear fleet on long term in a sustainable way? So we can start directly with uranium-233 by producing it in another place, in a Gen 3 or another Gen 4 or in MSFR reactors. We can start directly with enriched uranium, but when we calculate it, we need enrichment larger than 20%, which is not really correct regarding proliferation issues. We can start with plutonium on the currently minor actinides produced in light water reactor, but we have a solubility limit of these kind of elements in the salt, and we are just at the limit. And good idea is a mix of this solution. We can mix by we have different mix possible. I list here some calculation we perform with uranium started U3 started MSFR, true started MSFR, enriched uranium and transuranic element, and thorium with MOX, etc. There is many solutions. And the idea in the frame of SAMOFAR, in EVOL, was to optimize this not only regarding neutronics but also materials and chemistry. And finally, we propose this optimized initial composition of the fuel salt with thorium, of course, as fertile matter, with enriched uranium, enriched at 13%, and 3.3% of transuranic elements coming from light water reactor that we can burn in the reactor to start it, and that will be converted in uranium to 33, as you can see here. So if you look at the plain line, you can see that we put plutonium, curium, americium, neptunium in the reactor initially, and these elements are used by the reactor. We have at equilibrium 300 kilograms of plutonium, for example, while producing uranium-233 from thorium. we calculate the evolution of the fuel up to 2200 years, which is quite large. But the idea was to go to the steady state of the fuel, and then we can very well use the same fuel during 200 years because it's controlled, it's cleaned, and we can put the salt in another reactor after the first one has been stopped, and it's the same fuel. We can use the same fuel. We also have to say that it's very easy to burn, to use it to burn transuranic element because we don't have to fabricate the fuel. We can put the transuranic elements directly in the fuel and burn it directly without having to do pin, etc., which is quite more complicated in solid fuel reactor. So this fuel salt composition has been validated in EVOL and is used in SAMOFAR. And we have calculated some different starting modes and deployment capacities of the MSFR by using different type of MSFR. We can change the composition of the fuel salt during reactor operation, and we go up to a burner version starting without thorium. You take all the heavy nuclei except for thorium, higher than thorium. You put them in the reactor and you burn them to close the fuel cycle. It's end of game studies, and we show that we have very good deployment capacity. The transition to the thorium fuel cycle achieved, and we close the current fuel cycle by reducing the stockpile of produced transuranic elements. It's very satisfying. So this kind of element is very important for such reactor because it's easier to burn things when you don't have to do a lot of complicated things to produce the fuel. And I think coffee is ready. So next safety after coffee. So after the break, part 2 of MSFR. So I display here a view of the fuel circuit of the molten salt fast reactor. Just to a small word regarding terminology. We choose to call this fuel circuit, not primary circuit, but just because when we start the safety evaluation, we discover that some words are not the same, some concepts are not the same between solid fuel and liquid fuel reactor. And calling this element primary circuit is quite confusing because there is no cladding, for example, in it. So we choose to call it a fuel circuit by definition of where the fuel is located during power production. So the fuel circuit, the fuel is displayed in red. It enters the core at the bottom. It heats up due to nuclear reaction in the center of the core. And then it's extracted by pumps, injected in heat exchanger where it's cooled, and it re-enters the core. And the cycle is done in 4 seconds, so quite fast. The main characteristic of the MSFR, just to remind you, it's a liquid circulating fuel where the fuel is the coolant with a total power of 3 thermal gigawatt. A thermal yield to be evaluated precisely, so it's part of the work of SAMOFAR, of around 45%, a mean fuel salt temperature around 700 degrees, and a fast neutron spectrum, a thorium fuel cycle. And so here you have a display of the fuel salt circuit, but of course there is not only one circuit, but following the fuel salt circuit you have the intermediate circuit and then a thermal conversion circuit that is not yet designed, that is under definition. Knowing that the intermediate, I will show you where we are regarding load following, and the next step for load following evaluation is the definition of the intermediate circuit. That will be very important. We also have to take into account some draining and storage tanks for the fuel that I will explain more precisely, and of course the processing units. All this, with all this, you have the whole MSFR system. And now the history of MSFR relies on neutronic studies, chemical studies, and now we have the R&D activities rely on multidisciplinary expertise with reactor physics, chemistry, safety, design, materials, etc. With a collaboration in 3 levels, let's say, in a national frame, for example in France in CNRS, university, Areva, ARSN and EDF. and CEA very recently. In European frame with the Evol and now Samophar project, and then worldwide with GIF, and recently also the IAEA. And as presented by Jan Lenz this morning, brief overview of the reference configuration. I will not list everything, just to say that temperature rise in the core is around 100 degrees. We have a feedback coefficient of around minus 8 ppm per degree, as explained, very important, as explained by Sandra this morning. I will come back to the beta F also. And half of the feedback coefficient is due to density, half to Doppler. In the reactor, it's a compact core of a size of around 2 meters, so quite small. The next question is some MSFR design characteristics have a quite strong impact on the reactor operation. I remind you that the fuel is the coolant, and as you see, there is no control rods foreseen in the core. The reactor will be driven by the heat extraction. This requires the definition and assessment of the normal operation procedures and of safety approach dedicated to a liquid circulating fuel reactor. And this is goal, one of the objectives of the Samophar project. We are in the middle of the project, as explained by Jan Len. I list here the partners of the project, and I will not detail, of course, all Samophar, but I will focus mainly on WP1 that I'm in charge of, on integral safety approach, on system integration. I think that Sylvie will speak more precisely, Delpech on WP5 and Danny on WP4. And I think there will be presentation by Andrzej Benes on chemistry, on cleanup and control of the salt. On physical and chemical properties of the salt. And on a presentation of the proof of concept also on natural convection and draining of the salt. So, before detailing what we are doing in WP1 on the safety approach of the MSFR, just to remind you of specificities of a nuclear reactor that will impact the safety analysis. We have a huge energy reserve concentrating in the fuel. It's the advantage of fission, but it's also to be taken into account. There is an accumulation of radioactive elements produced during fission, which are dangerous and which produce heat. And there is a large release of energy even after the reactor shut down. And this leads us to the basis of the nuclear safety. It's to control the reactor through the three classical safety functions. First, to control the chain reaction at any time in any place of the reactor, to drive the reactor and to ensure subcriticality, to evacuate heat even after the chain reaction stops, to manage the residual heat, and finally to confine all the radioactive elements, and not only in the core, but in all the places, in all the parts of the reactor, of the system. And when we combine, of course, the idea with the safety analysis of the MSFR is to see how this is taken into account in the reactor operation and conception and design. So, just to remind you of some design aspects that will impact strongly this safety analysis. The fuel is liquid. The fuel acts as a coolant. We have a relative uniform fuel irradiation. And we have a significant part of the fissile inventory out of the core, not out of the vessel, of the core vessel, but out of the core in the heat exchangers. And the fuel is processed and loaded during reactor operation. There are positive, maybe negative, and specific characteristics. There is no control rods in the core. The reactivity is controlled by the heat transfer rate in the heat exchangers, the fuel salt feedback coefficient, a continuous fissile loading, and we can change the geometry of the fuel. There is no requirement for controlling the neutron flux shape, on the contrary of a solid fuel reactor. We can drain the fuel salt A cold shutdown may be obtained by draining the molten salt in a normal operation storage tank, even if the idea is to have the fuel as often as possible in the core, even at 0 power, because it's the best place to cool it and to manage it. But if we need to replace something, we can put the fuel in a dedicated storage tank. We can change the fuel geometry to guarantee adequate shutdown margin and cooling for subcriticality and cooling. And the fuel draining can be done passively or actively. And there is two dedicated systems, a normal operation storage system and an emergency draining system. When we look at this, we immediately see that we need some design definition, at least of the core of the emergency draining system. We need to define the normal operation procedures, to have a safety evaluation to identify the accident initiators, the accident scenarios, and a safety approach to define what is a severe accident for such a reactor, which barriers, what about reactivity control, etc. So, I will start with the design definitions and the normal operation procedures and the safety evaluation and approach. So the two first tasks of WP1 in SAMOFA were the identification of reference design and the data important for safety. And in this frame, we propose something. If you consider the LOLF accident, loss of liquid fuel, it's specific to MSR. If we consider the loss of liquid fuel accident, there is no tools available for quantitative analysis, but qualitatively, if you consider this view of the reactor, there is a lot of pipes, there is a complex structure, multiple connections. So the first idea may be to put a corrector connected to the draining tank, but another idea may be to completely change the geometry of the fuel circuits, and then we have proposed an integrated MSFR design to suppress completely pipes and sus leaks. So instead of this, we consider a vessel, a core vessel, containing the fuel salt and surrounded by tanks to store the fuel salt and the fertile salt. Then you have cooling or circulating rods, as you prefer. It means modules, including a pump and a heat exchanger that are put in the vessel, in the core vessel, to circulate the fuel and to cool the fuel. And then the fuel is contained by the vessel, not by the cooling rods. It's important. And finally, you put a collector in case of leakage of the vessel, to collect the fuel salt and to put it in the emergency draining tank. By doing this, we suppress the pipes and the possibilities of leaks leakage related to the pipes. Of course, we have to study now with this new design the safety level of the reactor. In the same spirit, we redefine the emergency draining system. So you have a shaft and a draining tank here. And the emergency draining system, EDS, has to contain the fuel in case of leak. We can drain the fuel in case of severe anomaly in the core. And it has to be reversible because we want to recover the fuel salt to restart the reactor once it's repaired. There is some subsystem in the EDS, opening devices at the bottom of the core, active and passive, like cold plug, for example, a transfer system with a collector and a draining shaft, and then emergency draining tank. What we have to ensure as function in the EDS is to be subcritical in all circumstances, to be able to evacuate the residual power over a long time period and to have the fuel salt liquid as long as possible at a temperature, at a controlled temperature. And the system must be leak proof, of course. So if I, so if I concentrate on the subcriticality in all circumstances, in the emergency draining tank, so you have here a display of the tank geometry. In fact, it's like the core. It's a vessel containing the fuel after draining, in which you have cooling rods. Each cooling rod being made of a channel for the coolant a layer of inert salt to absorb the residual heat, maximum residual heat, just when you drain it. It will be solid in the first time and then liquid to absorb the first part of the residual heat. And then, of course, the fuel salt in red. The inert salt is a fusible material to improve the thermal inertia of the system, because due to the small fuel salt volume, there is a small inertia in the fuel circuit, but here the thermal inertia is improved to reduce the power to be evacuated by the coolant, to increase the inertia, and to protect, of course, the metallic walls. And when, oops, strange. I have welcome for the third part. I think the last one of the lecture. So if you remember well, we were in the design of the emergency draining system, and more precisely on the criticality studies on the emergency draining tank performed by Delphine Gérardin. And just to illustrate a part of the systematic studies that has been done, here we have calculated this multiplication factor of the draining tank by fixing the wall thickness, the number of cooling rods, by geometry optimization, and by studying several layer thickness of the fuel salt, of the inert salt. And as you can see, all configuration ensures subcriticality with a large margin, so no problem of subcriticality by design in the draining tank. More details in the fast reactor proceedings. Now we arrive to the next step, the definition of the normal operation procedures for the molten salt fast reactor, which are under working in the frame of SAMOFA. So I just would like to illustrate two operation procedure very characteristic of a molten salt reactor. It's the load following, already presented briefly by Jan Len, and the startup procedure. So regarding the load following, the idea is to accomplish load following without using control rods, by just varying the power extracted from the core by the intermediate circuit, while of course keeping the structural materials temperature as constant as possible, because you have to have less constraint as possible on the materials. So the idea, we have several levers for that. We can play on the fuel salt circulation speed by adjusting the power of the pumps, the intermediate fluid circulation speed, and finally the temperature of the intermediate fluid, for example, by using a bypass. We can also, if necessary, reduce the criticality temperature by, for example, injecting bubbles, but only if necessary, if it's necessary to control the reactivity or to lower the fuel temperature. Of course, this is just ideas on a paper, and we need at least some calculation, and more precisely multiphysics calculation, to evaluate the load following capacities of the core regarding neutronics and thermal hydraulics. So I will present you a tool that developed for the MSFR to do such calculation, and then a system code, a plant simulator, is under development to study and refine this operation procedure and the impact on the safety analysis. So regarding transient calculation, we used for this evaluation the coupling of a CFD code for thermal hydraulics, as mentioned by Sandra. It's important. I will illustrate the streamlines in the reactor. You will see. So a CFD model for thermal hydraulics, and for neutronics, the idea was to use the precision of Monte Carlo calculation, but in a reduced time. So the idea, Axel Leroux developed during his PhD thesis a neutronic model called transient fission matrix, and the idea of that was to have a precise and fast calculation for transient calculation. So I remind you that regarding neutronics, you produce power that will impact the temperature field, the buoyancy, the precursor production that can be followed as particles, let's say. And then the thermal hydraulic code will give you, after calculation, the evolution of the temperature field and the precursor delay position. This will be given to the neutronics back to evaluate the delayed neutron source and the Doppler feedback effect and the density feedback effect. So the thermal hydraulics, you have the 1/16 of the MSFR with the core on the heat exchanger, and you have an example of meshes used for CFD on the neutronics. And regarding neutronics, the idea is to do perturbation of the reactor to inject neutrons in one place with green functions to see the behavior of the reactor. It means where these neutrons will produce new fission, to do a stochastic calculation, precise calculation of this behavior of the reactor, and then to store this in fission matrices and at a given temperature, and to store also a time matrix, the time from one neutron to go to another place to do fission. And you calculate 4 fission matrices for the delayed on the prompt neutrons, prompt to prompt, delayed to delayed, prompt to delayed, etc. And then you use these matrices directly in a deterministic calculation, in a kinetic equation written here, for the evolution of the population of prompt neutrons here, and the evolution of the population of delayed, of a precursor for delayed neutrons. And the first calculation of the matrices is quite long, precise, 1 day, but performed only once per reactor configuration. And then there is on-the-fly interpolation to adapt the metrics to be used to the good temperature field provided by the CFD code, and the good matrices are put here, and then the kinetic equations, the efficient matrices and the kinetic equations are integrated in the thermal hydraulic code in OpenFOAM to do the neutronics and thermal hydraulics coupling during transient calculation, and quite immediately. So very fast regarding neutronics. The time is driven by the thermal hydraulics calculation. So this has been validated on the MSFR, and also this model has been used on a PWR and has been extrapolated, modified, and validated recently on ASTRID, on a sodium fast reactor. When you have the first idea is to calculate the steady state of the reactor. So you have here a calculation of equilibrium solution with, on the left, the velocity in the reactor, on the streamline, the streamlines that are displayed from one particle coming from here to in the core, and you can see that we need CFD calculations because of the vortex and of the distribution of the velocities in the core. Then you have here the power distribution at equilibrium with the core on the heat exchanger. Of course, the power is produced at the center of the core. You have a distribution of the temperature field in the reactor, in the core, in the heat exchangers, and you have a distribution of the precursors, mean value, here in the localization of the precursor and, with a great importance at the center of the core, or no importance in the heat exchangers. And we can see that the beta circ is 42% of the whole beta available in the reactor. So the question is, with such a reduced fraction of delayed neutrons, what happens when you do perturbation of the core? Does it react correctly or not? So the next step is to try it and then to do, for example, a load following of 33% in 1 minute, which is quite fast and quite large, by going from 3 to 2 gigawatt or 2 to 3. I will take the red case, 2 to 3 gigawatts in 1 minute. And then we play on the dotted line here, the extracted power. And we have a look at the other parameters. It means when you extract more heat here, on the dotted line, you have a cooling of the fuel, inducing by feedback effect an increase of reactivity, but it's a margin to prompt criticality, and we are far below 0, no prompt critical regime, no problem. And then the produced power in plane lane perfectly is more power is produced and perfectly follows the extracted power. We can have a look at in a 3D distribution or in the core of the power on the left and the temperature on the right, here at the initial state. And you can see, again, it will start again, that initially we have a low power in the reactor, and then you start increasing, you cool the temperatures, and you cool here, and then you have an increase of power in the core. You cool here, you have an increase of power in the core, but the field, the temperature field, it's quite stable in the core. No problem with structural materials. So to conclude, because the nuclear heat is deposited directly in the coolant, the produced power exactly follows extracted power. The reactor is very flexible and well adapted for load following, for neutronics and thermal hydraulic issues. Of course, we have to design the intermediate circuit to do so. And the load following is driven by the extracted power only, no control rules needed. So this confirms the excellent load following capacities of the MSFR core. So now we arrive to the startup procedure. How do we start the MSFR? We fill it. We put fuel in the core, let's say. Of course, we have to follow what happens. So 2 steps. First, a filling step, the approach to criticality step. So the intermediate fluid is brought to temperature, let's say above the fuel melting temperature, put in circulation because we cool the walls of the vessel, of the core vessel, with the intermediate fluid. And the fertile blanket is filled at the same temperature, above the fuel melting temperature. Then we start injecting fuel salt at this same temperature in the core. Of course, we have a limited time to fill for the filling procedure because of the residual heat. During the filling, we do not cool the fuel. It cannot circulate. Then, during core filling, thanks to a neutron source in the lower reflector, we measure the reactivity. We have a measurement of the reactivity to know when the reactivity that will be reached when the filling is done. And after filling completes, the fuel salt temperature is not exactly the nominal operating temperature, so we have to adjust it to start the reactor. And then the next step is the divergence step. It means we start circulating the fuel and cooling the fuel, and we start the reactor. So it's very nice like this, but we have to do some calculations, and we start some already. So first thing, how do we, during the approach to criticality, how do we measure, how do we predict, and how do we measure the reactivity? So we have a filling of the core, and we have uncertainties. We have uncertainties, and for the first startup of the reactor even more, on the cross-section, on the design, on many things. So we study here the uncertainty on the cross-sections of the fuel, of the element of the fuel. And the idea is to define a ratio corresponding to the neutron flux for a given volume to the neutron flux for volume 0, knowing that what we measure is a neutron source located at the bottom of the core, measured at the top of the core, and that will, with a fuel salt between the source and the detector. And as you can see, we have many set of, so we have the different volume, and each point corresponds to a set of cross-sections corresponding to an uncertainty. And then the idea is to have the precision of this determination, the uncertainty of the multiplication factor. You have here a serpent view of the flux of the neutron flux during the reactor filling. And the idea is to know the uncertainty and the multiplication factor at the end of the filling. So, if you consider this table, we know that we can correct reactivity quickly by changing the fuel salt temperature, by injecting bubbles, for example, or slowly by modifying the fuel salt composition. We can adjust at around 250 ppm, let's say. So we would like a precision of better than that at the end of the filling, and we can see that we have a precision of we have this precision between at the middle of the filling, let's say at 11.5 cubic meter. At 11.5 cubic meter, we can know better than this precision what will be the final reactivity when all the fuel salt is in the core. Of course, we have to do additional studies to include an internal neutron source in the fuel salt, because there is neutron production by spontaneous fissions, by alpha N reactions. So this is not taken into account yet, to be sure of the price. When will it be possible to determine the final reactivity? But then another question. Imagine that the reactor is critical before being filled, completely filled. What happens? we continue filling the core, we inject reactivity on the critical reactor. So of course, we have to evaluate this. And I display here the reactivity insertion when criticality is reached as a function of the volume for which we reach criticality, and is not linear. We are not a linear, of course. And the idea is then to study the abnormal situation where the reactor is critical and we continue injecting fuel salt. And for that, we have to do transient calculation using the TFM OpenFOAM tool presented before. So what we do is a reactivity insertion between the filling and the diversion step. The reactor is filled, but at 0 power. So 0 power, no feedback effect, because no heating. So the reactor is filled, but without fuel circulation. It's very important. It begins to be critical, and then there is an injection of 1000 ppm in 10, 33, 100, 333 on 1000 seconds. And then you have here the evolution of the margin to prompt criticality. We reach prompt criticality when we are at 0 here, of the power, of the produced extracted power on the temperature of the reactor. And you have no heat extraction because no fuel circulation here. And you can see that the reactor remains below prompt criticality even from a rate of 33 ppm per second. We are very near prompt criticality for the 10th injection in 10 seconds, 1000 ppm in 10 seconds. The final temperature, of course, we have only, it's around 1000 Kelvin if we have only Doppler, or the calculations are done with or without density effect, because there is no density effect if the reactor is not filled. It's not full. We have to evaluate only the impact of the Doppler if the reactor is not full. If you have an expansion of the fuel salt, it will not lead to a reduction of criticality, reactivity. And then you can see something strange. There is an increase of reactivity on the long term. So there is injection of reactivity, feedback, reduction, stabilization, but there is an increase of reactivity here, which is maybe strange. And this is due, to a slow thermal diffusion, because I remind you, so you have the evolution of the velocity on the left, or the temperature on the right, at the beginning, let's say, and during time, and there is a fast homogenization of the temperature between the middle and the top, because logically by convection. But there is no homogenization between the bottom and the middle, the cold part and the hot part. So the homogenization between the bottom and the middle is only due to thermal diffusion, and this is very slow, a very slow process. And when the cold fuel arrives at the middle of the core, where the importance is more large, it increases reactivity logically, and it's why you observe this part here. So, in conclusion, the reactor has an excellent behavior in case of reactivity injection, even at low power, which is very important. And we really understand the physics of the core thanks to these simulations. One last thing, an overcooling accident at low power. You have the reactor at 0 power, only with the decay, the spontaneous fission, let's say, and then you do an overcooling, an excessive cooling in the heat exchangers, and then you start very quickly the reactor with only a very small feedback effect because we are at low power. And the idea is to see, can we reach prompt criticality, and what happens when we reach prompt criticality. So the overcooling has been done from instantaneous in 0 seconds to 100 seconds, which is more realistic regarding the inertia of the intermediate circuit on the pumps. And what we observe is that we reach prompt criticality for the instantaneous version. And when we, just to show you, when we reach prompt criticality, you cannot tell me in which case we reach prompt criticality. In fact, it's for the red curve only. But for the green one, we also have the same behavior. So there is no modification of the reactor behavior when we reach prompt criticality. There is no cliff edge effect. The reactor behavior is safe, whatever happens, even if when the reactor is prompt critical. This is very important. This is known for homogeneous reactor, as for the Silane reactor in Valduc, which is used to produce high neutron flux by being prompt critical, and there is no problem. The prompt criticality is absorbed by the hydrolysis of water in Silane by the expansion of the salt here. So there is no problem, and prompt criticality is avoided for time constant larger than 30 seconds, which is realistic. But even if you reach prompt criticality in the system, it behaves safe, and this is very important. So finally, we arrive on the development of an integral safety assessment on the identification of the risk and phenomena. And we choose to combine the ISAM methodology developed by GIF, proposed by GIF, let's say, with a systematic risk analysis. And if I focus first on the systematic risk analysis, by applying this systematic risk analysis, which is underworking in the frame of SAMOPHAR, we identify some main accident types by the knowledge on PWR, by the work performed in EVOL on the PhD thesis of Maria Brovchenko, by this preliminary systematic risk analysis, and by taking into account the new design, integrated design of the MSFR. And then we identified some accident for the fuel circuit, loss of heat sink, loss of fuel flow, total loss of power, overcooling, loss of liquid fuel, or reactivity anomalies accident. We identify accident for the draining system, emergency draining system, and some design extension conditions. If I focus on the reactivity anomalies accident, this list has been done in the frame of SAMOPHAR by Delphine Girardin, working with our colleague from Politecnico di Torino. And if I focus on the reactivity anomalies accident, once we have identified an accident, we have to compute, to calculate, to analyze it. And you have here a reactivity insertion in a full power reactor of 1000 PCM in 1 second, which is a value given by IRSN in their report for MSFR. They cannot see how we can reach such an insertion. We try it. And you have the margin to prompt criticality. Here we have to say below 0. We are the power, the evolution of power, and the variation of temperature, fuel salt temperature in the core, with the evolution of power on the left and temperature on the right. And when we have a look, we have reactivity insertion here, leading to an increase of power, leading to an increase of temperature, of course, then stabilization, and then some cold fuel salt enters the core, and we do a small jump of reactivity. Everything is taken into account, and you can see that even with a reduced fraction of delayed neutrons, the reactor behaves very, very safely. And finally, we have a very good behavior of the reactor to compensate a fast, in 1 second, reactivity insertion. The very fast feedback are due to the fact that the fuel is the coolant. There is many spatial effects, as mentioned by Sandra, to be taken into account, and I think that Danny, Pablo for the CFD part, and Danny then for the coupling multiphysics will present it in more detail, the tools and the equations that have to be taken into account. And we can see that there were no prompt critical regime up to 5000 PCM inserted in 1 second, so not possible. And I remind you of the parametric transition studies that I showed just before, the overcooling during startup. Even if we reach prompt criticality, there is no cliff edge effect. And this is very, very, very positive for the analysis of the reactor. So finally, arriving to the safety approach and analysis, the identification of risk and phenomena involved, of accident initiators, accident scenarios in the frame of the PhD thesis, and Anna Chiara Ugenti and Delphine Girardin are working on a combination of different tools to do this assessment, and using the functional failure mode on effect analysis applied at Polito on other systems, which is a functional analysis to identify all the subsystems, identification of the hazards on initiators during the during the stages very preliminary of design right now, because we would like to improve the design if necessary regarding safety, and we can do very soon. We can be very innovative by including safety at the early stage of the design, and this is very positive. It's a bottom-up approach combined with a master logic diagram by identification of the hazard and initiative events of the plant with a top-down approach, and then they are working on the list of postulated initiating events, and then the next step is the lines of defense to guarantee that every accidental evolution of the reactor state is always prevented by a minimum set of safety features. It's very important. Just to illustrate maybe quickly the FMEA approach, there is a subdivision of the system into subsystems, functionally independent. Then an identification of the function of each subsystem is very systematic, so that we cannot miss something. We do not apply the classical guidelines. It may be dangerous here. The system is too different, as for all Gen 4 systems mentioned. Then an analysis of functional failure mode of what is detectable, the safeguard, and then an identification of the postulated initiated event, a complete list. And this has been applied already on MSFR and on the power production step of the MSFR. And this, among other things, led to the definition of the barriers, because we can apply directly, as done previously. We would like 3 barriers. We identified by comparing to PWR 3 barriers. And this is not a good idea. We have to start again from the safety functions and from the basis of safety, and we have to ask how many barriers do we need, why, which barriers, and then ZIFMEA has been used for this, and barrier has been proposed as displayed here by Delphine and Chiara. The idea is to use the last version of the design of the MSFR, and then by considering the collector under the core vessel, not including the storage tank now, to facilitate the maintenance on the emergency draining system. We have to maintain it, of course. And if we put the fuel in the storage tank and then we have maintenance on the EDS and the collector is below the storage tank, you have a safety problem. So then the first barrier is the fuel circuit containment on the EDS. Okay, so the first barrier is in green here, for this part. The second barrier is the fuel casing in red, and the last barrier in the reactor building in dark, black here. And there is also an alternative proposal to include the EDS in the second barrier, maybe, linked to the frequency of use of EDS, to see how much time we will use it, and to guarantee the integrity and leak tightness of the EDS is difficult to guarantee at the level of the first barrier. So we can include it in the second barrier, not in the first barrier. This is under reflection, and we'll discuss it in the coming days in SAMOFAR. So please we read the document we sent for all the SAMOFAR partners so that we can conclude. Thank you. And no, I don't conclude. You will eat, but not now. Just to finish, when you combine the systematic risk analysis with the ISAM methodology, we have exchanges with the GIF group, Risk and Safety Working Group of GIF. We would like to have exchanges with IAEA on safety and proliferation. We started. I hope it will be okay. And the idea is to develop a safety approach dedicated to a fast spectrum MSR with circulating fuel based on the classical safety principles, but adapted to the MSFR characteristics, severe accident, barrier, practical elimination, of course, and to build a reactor risk analysis model to identify the initiators, the high-risk scenario, the risk due to residual heat and radioactive inventory, not only in the reactor, but also in the processing, in the storage tank, etc., to evaluate the barriers and to allow the reactor designer to estimate impact of design changes to do the real approach of design by safety, which is very important. I just would like to finish, yes, 2 more slides, on the demonstrators, on the demonstration step, because very often we have questions of on which demonstrator you dream. On a lot, in fact. It will cost a lot of money. Let's start. It's not demonstrator, it's demonstration steps. You have to have many facilities, small size facility for pyrochemistry, for monitoring, for medium size for process analysis, modeling, thermal hydraulics, etc., technological test, and full-size experiment for the validation of technology integration of hydrodynamics, of course, and combined to 3 levels of hydroprotection: inactive simulant salt to study the hydrodynamic, materials measurement, model validation, low activity level with thorium or depleted uranium for pyrochemistry, corrosion, chemical monitoring, and finally high activity level, a reactor. Nuclear facility for fuel cell processing, actinide recycling, etc. How to start, how to stop, everything. It's important. And when you take the final step, which is the demonstrator, you have the full-size experiment with a high activity level, and this may be this guy. So let's say around 100 thermal megawatts. The same temperature, mean temperature as for the full-size MSFR, but a reduced temperature rise in the core. Something representative regarding the time for the fuel to circulate, but only 2 cubic meters. It means that we reduce the power by a factor 30, the volume by a factor 10. We reduce the specific power, and this guy can be really representative of the MSFR. And then we have an ID. We just calculate what we need to start it, 600 kilograms of uranium-233. It's an underbreeder reactor, very low impact of the chemical processing rate, really not mandatory for the demonstrator. We can extract fuel salt to test the chemical steps, it's not mandatory to operate it. And then another ID. We add fertile blanket all around the small core. Now it's not a demonstrator anymore, it's a small medium reactor, or SMSFR, small MSFR, and it's a breeder. It's a small modular breeder MSR. Very nice. And this small modular reactor is quite compact, 2 cubic meters, a reduced temperature to use classical materials, the same temperature rise as the demonstrator. And finally, we have the advantages of a molten salt reactor. The advantages of a reduced power reactor, it means reduced irradiation damages, less specific power to be extracted, it simplifies the heat exchanger design, a reduced residual heat for safety, it may be operated 30 years with the same fuel on a simplified fuel cleanup, the fuel control but a simplified fuel cleanup. It's a very compact reactor, and so maybe it can be built faster. And if we combine this with uranium-plutonium fuel cycle, it may be even easier. And the idea is next step for, in parallel to the Samofar project, we start studies on this small MSFR or SMSFR. So we will see in some years. Please come back in some years. And by then, some theses in France on MSR. You can find theses on papers on the MSFR reactor physics and safety on this horrible address, or MSFR LPSC in Google. All is available. And there are also other publications more large in the frame of GE for the handbook or the book published recently of SNETP also. And thank you for your attention on lunchtime, I think.